Good morning and good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen, depending on which part of the world you're in. My name is Roger Aston. I'm the Executive Chairman of our company, and I welcome you to this annual general meeting of shareholders for PharmAust. As it's past the appointed time of 2 p.m. Western Standard Time and a quorum is present, I declare the meeting open. Today's meeting is being held online via the Lumi platform. This allows shareholders and proxies to attend the meeting virtually. All attendees can watch a live broadcast or webcast of this meeting. In addition, shareholders and proxies have the ability to ask questions and submit votes. Questions can be submitted anytime. To ask a question, press on the speech bubble icon. This will open a new screen, and at the bottom of that screen, there is a section for you to type your question. Once you have finished typing, please hit the arrow symbol to send. Please note that while you can submit questions from now on, I will not address them until the relevant time in the meeting. Please also note that your questions may be moderated, or if we receive multiple questions on a topic, amalgamated together. Finally, due to time constraints, we may run out of time to answer all your questions, and as such, you can always reach out to the company for answers. Voting today will be conducted by way of poll and all items of business. In order to provide you with enough time to vote, I will shortly open voting for all resolutions. At that time, if you're eligible to vote at this meeting, a new polling icon will appear. Select this icon. Selecting this icon will bring up a list of resolutions and present you with voting options. To cast your vote, simply select one of the options. There is no need to hit the submit or enter button as the vote is automatically recorded. You do, however, have the ability to change your vote up until the time I declare the voting closed. I now declare voting open on all items of business. The polling icon will soon appear. Please submit your votes anytime. I will give you a warning before I move to closing the voting. Let me first start off by introducing my colleagues and fellow directors. Some of you are here with the board, but for those who are not, may I introduce Mr. Sam Wright, Mr. Robert Bishop, and Mr. Neville Bassett. Also present are Dr. Richard Mollard, Chief Scientific Officer, and Mr. Colin Lagalia, CEO of Epichem. Can I please also introduce our company auditor, Tutu Fong from RSM, and the company solicitor, Tony Fairweather from Fairweather Corporate Lawyers. Sam, are there any apologies?
Yes, Roger, I can advise that Graham Darcy sends his apologies. He can't make today's meeting, unfortunately, but he sends his apologies. He's appointed me as his corporate representative, and I'll be voting. He hasn't sent through his proxy votes, so they're not included in the proxies you'll see on the next screen, but I will be voting in favour of all resolutions on behalf of Graham. Thank you.
Thank you, Sam. Okay, so after the formal part of the AGM, there will be a shareholder presentation and we'll answer questions received. Now moving to the formal part of the notice of meeting. The notice of meeting has been circulated to all shareholders. I do not intend to read the notice in full. I will table it as read. I can advise that the company has received valid proxies as per the slide on the monitor, which is in quite small print. Financial statements and reports. The first item on the agenda is to receive and consider the annual financial report of the company for the financial year ended 30th of June 21, together with the declaration of the directors report, the remuneration report, and the auditor's report. Moving to the resolutions now. Resolution 1 is the adoption of the remuneration report, and that is to consider and if thought fit to pass with or without amendment the following resolution as a non-binding resolution, that for the purposes of Section 250(r)(2) of the Corporations Act and for all other purposes, approval is given, is given for the adoption of the remuneration report in the annual report of the company for the financial year ended 30th of June 2021. Resolution 2 is to consider and if thought fit to pass the following resolution as an ordinary resolution, that Sam Wright, who retires by rotation in accordance with Rule 7.3 of the Constitution of the company and Listing Rule 14.4, and being eligible offers himself for re-election, is hereby re-elected as a director of the company. Resolution 3, the re-election of Neville Bassett, and to consider and if thought fit to pass the following resolution as an ordinary resolution, that Neville Bassett, who retires by rotation in accordance with Rule 7.3 of the Constitution of the company and Listing Rule 14.4, and being eligible offers himself for re-election, is hereby re-elected as a director of the company. Resolution 4 is the approval of the additional 10% capacity. As such, to consider and if thought fit to pass with or without amendment the following resolution as a special resolution, that the company have the additional capacity to issue equity securities provided for Listing Rule 7.1A. Resolution 5 is the approval to issue securities under the Employee Incentive Scheme, and to consider and if thought fit to pass with or without amendment the following resolution as an ordinary resolution, that the issue of securities under the Employee Incentive Plan for a period of 3 years from the meeting is approved under and for the purposes of Listing Rule 7.2, exception 13B, and for all other purposes, on the terms set out in the explanatory statement, I beg your pardon. Ladies and gentlemen, that concludes our discussion on the items of business. In a short while, I will close the voting system. Please ensure that you have cast your votes on all resolutions. I will now pause to allow you time to finalize the votes. Hopefully that's enough time for everyone to have put their cross in the box. So voting is now closed. I therefore declare the poll closed. The share registry will independently collate and verify the votes, and final results of the poll will be released to the stock exchange later today. That concludes the formal business of the meeting, and I declare the meeting closed. We now have a shareholder presentation for you, followed by a Q&A, a question and answer session. Thank you for that. We're repurposing Monopanto, and we have been doing this for a number of years. And I think we're coming to an important stage in the evolution of the company. But let me just highlight, most of our shareholders know what repurposing is. But for those who feel or are recently on the register, or who feel they don't know, repurposing is basically identifying new activities or functionalities of existing registered molecules in the market. We are doing exactly that, and we've identified that Monopanto has both cancer activity and potentially anti-COVID-19 activity. And as you can see on the last bullet point there, Pyc MND, one of the leading Australian charities for motor neuron disease, has awarded us with $880,000 to investigate Monopanto in MND. And the way it's done, just for understanding, is that you try to work out if there's a new mechanism operating. And based on that mechanism of action of the molecule, you can identify which diseases might benefit from the use of that molecule, which is what our strategy has involved. So the product in question, Monopanto, was registered by Novartis many years ago. And of course, Novartis was purchased by Elanco not that long ago. And the product is registered in 38 countries. So we know it's safe, we know it's active, it can be manufactured, and it can be formulated. And after a number of years of phase 1 and phase 2 work and fine tuning, which is still going on, by the way, in phase 2, We're expecting to start a phase 3 trial for registration purposes, and that will start in April 2022, all being well. We have reformulated Monopantal as a tablet for canine and human cancer, and that process is also in development, and we are looking at scored tablets as well for smaller dogs and so on. So we're targeting initially cancer, both human and veterinary, but veterinary is far ahead because it's an already registered veterinary product. In science, if things typically work in canines, we expect them to work well in humans, or as well in humans, subject to dose and so on. So with where we are, we think we can initiate and have initiated discussions with a major pharmaceutical company. And I might add that about not even 18 months ago, about 13 months ago, September last year, we had an option with a major pharmaceutical company, which they declined to exercise. And when we asked them, why don't you exercise? They indicated that they were looking for blockbuster data. I think that's coming into reach now. So we're expecting great things for the following year, 2022. And of course, with the success in the canine cancer, which I hope you will recognize as we go through the presentation, this is an excellent springboard for treatment of other human diseases. And by way of process, I just would like to emphasize that the presentation is split in 3 parts. I'll make a few introductory remarks on the first few slides, and then Richard Mollard, our chief scientist, will take over and discuss in particular the manufacture and the human applications. And then Colin Lagalia will talk about Epichem, our wholly owned subsidiary. Can we go to the next slide, please? So is there a value proposition here? Well, we've studied, of course, very carefully what treatments are applied to dogs with cancer, and in particular, a very nasty cancer, which is called B-cell lymphoma, very aggressive. And we've looked at where our product sits, and we'll come back to this point in a moment. But if we look at the value proposition, and safety, of course, is high on the list. We have an excellent safety profile. It's not chemotherapy, and we don't see chemotherapy type events. We have, in the fine tuning we've done, we have no weight loss, we have no inaptitudes, we have good quality of life. Home administration by the owner, no ethical issues in the as there are for using of chemotherapy. And patients can go home, canine patients that is, can go home immediately with the family, whereas of course with chemotherapy there's sometimes withholding periods before children can touch the dogs because of contamination. So safety, we tick, I think, pretty well all the boxes. Efficacy, which of course is vital, otherwise what's the point? We have looked at untreated dogs, and some of them, when they are diagnosed with cancer, are taken away and brought back in, say, a week or 2 weeks to be put down. We can quadruple the time that a dog has in the absence of any treatment. So we could be looking quite easily at 2 to 3 months survival. And when I say survival, I mean stable disease without side effects, without progression. And progression is often, of course, what is the end point at which you take it back to the vet for euthanasia. Manufacturing, you'll hear from Richard, so I'm not going to double up and go again, but that is proceeding very well at the moment. Economics, we're much cheaper than chemotherapy, and we offer almost as good as, almost enter the range of chemotherapy, and I'll come back to that point. We've opened a dialogue with Vet Major, and we're sensing a different attitude to what we had a year and a half ago when we were discussing exercising the option. Finally, registration. we've initiated dialogue with the FDA, or the processes to initiate dialogue with the FDA. The next slide, please. So in summary, we fine-tuned the dosing so that we've alleviated the inappetence that we saw historically and the weight loss that we saw historically. And with the optimization, we've also found that we've increased the efficacy. So we're very pleased with ourselves on those counts. We're showing that 100% of treated animals go into stable disease. In other words, we stop the progression of the cancer. And we can quadruple survival over untreated and double the mean survival over prednisolone. So prednisolone is a sort of reach first for the vet when a dog with cancer comes in. It's basically an anti-inflammatory, but it also suppresses the immune system, and there are issues with it. And again, we'll come back to that in a moment. The key thing for us is when you take your dog to the vet, and you take it away, you hope that it will be in good spirits and have a good quality of life. If it's suffering, you'd probably want to put it down or euthanize it on the spot. And all of the feedback that we've had from owners whilst doing our trials are that the quality of life is very good. We've started discussions with the FDA, and we're training up now for GCP, good clinical practice implementation, which is necessary, of course, for registration purposes. And we've started discussions with major pharma, which we hope will be an exciting process in coming months. Next one, please. How do we place the product? How do we carve out advantage and compete with what's already in the market? And I think our primary competition comes from both the median survival that we're observing, but also in the safety. So if I can draw your attention to chemotherapy, or CHOP, which is a cocktail of 4 chemotherapies, what we see is when a dog is treated, and it's often treated in cycles, they may get 3 or 4 cycles, the quality of life is poor. The animal has diarrhea, vomiting, bladder irritation, weight loss, inappetence, immunosuppression. And due to the above, questionable ethics. Should you let an animal hang around for the human benefit when it's in pain, suffering from advanced aggressive cancers? So all these factors come into the marketing equation. And the target market, of course, for chemotherapy is only 15 to 20%. And the reason for that is the cost. As you can see in number 8, you'd expect to spend at least $5,000 in treatment. And some dogs who have several rounds of chemotherapy will be in the 10,000 mark. Not a lot of owners wish to extend that much, particularly as it's not therapeutic. It's only a palliative treatment. So your dog could still die in 6 months, even though you have spent your $10,000. So if you look at prednisolone, the first drug that the vet would typically pop into the dog to alleviate some of the inflammation associated with the cancer, has got side effects, mainly thirst, appetite, frequency in urination, panting, lethargy. And the key one for me is it's a steroid. It suppresses the immune system, and development or worsening of infections is often seen, and then that compounds everything. Then not only has the dog got cancer, but worsening infections. So even though the cost is only $40 a month, we feel it's not a preferred route. And I think most vets would say it's just a holding pattern before the dog is euthanized. With Monopantel, once they go on treatment, they have, from the feedback we've had from owners, excellent quality of life. They're participatory. They play games. The commercial positioning is targeting 60 to 80% of the canines. We double life expectancy, as I said, over prednisolone alone, and we have no risk of contamination from chemotherapy of the patient. And of course, if we mix it with prednisolone, the outcomes are significantly better. Next slide, please. So this slide is really where we're placing the product. There's two sources. One is, if you're just comparing against chemotherapy, is a lot of owners don't want to spend the money, and often the chemotherapy is of limited value other than some palliative benefit. So we think owners are going to look very carefully at giving their dog 4 to 6 months quality life before they put it down. So we think we have a strong advantage there. There's no pain associated with the drug, good quality of life, no toxicity issues, home medicated again, which is attractive. And of course, we like to draw attention to the euthanasia group who come in with a dog where the vet says your dog probably has 2 to 4 weeks. And the owner says, well, either put him down now or I'll bring him back in 2 weeks. The decision is made at that point. We'd like the vet to give a combination of prednisolone plus MPL and give the dog that chance for 4 to 6 months good quality life. I think on that note, I'll pass on to Richard. And the next slide, please. Richard, are you okay with this?
Yep, thank you very much, Roger. So thank you, Roger, for the introduction and the summary of the vet component of our activities at PharmAust. So this next part really gives a bit of a background to how we got there for the new shareholders, and also transition into what we're doing now with the new data we're having out and our timelines and what we're expecting in the future. So as Roger was speaking about, Monopantal started as a sheep anthelmintic, and it was first registered in New Zealand in 2009 and Australia in 2010, and it targets acetylcholine receptors, a specific subclass of receptors found in the worms that infect sheep. And so it causes paralysis of the worms and they die, and also their larvae. And it's important to note that these receptors are not present in the worms that infect humans, and also not present in humans as well. So it's a very specific action for the worms that infect sheep. For registration in over the 38 countries globally, there are publicly available documents which are required so the public can be informed on what products are out in the market. And this one here is an example of the one for Monopantal, Azolvix, under the Australian Pesticides and Veterinary Medicine Association. And this is publicly available for anybody at this website who cares to have a look. It's a very interesting document. It explains all the toxicology, safety, the pharmacokinetics or blood plasma levels in the sheep, absorption, metabolism, elimination, very comprehensive. And as well as in sheep, it also explains any safety toxicity issues in other animals, because for registration you have to show a broad depth of animal species just to be sure. So one of the animals that Novartis originally chose was beagle dogs, and this of course has been helpful for PharmAust with the safety data and pharmacokinetics going into the current cancer trials. We know from these data, and you can see here, you can give dogs 10 grams a day and for 4 weeks and they're fine. There's minimal toxicity. And with 1 gram a day as well in these studies for 52 weeks, there's also minimal toxicity. So it's a very safe drug. One of the original directors with PharmAust was a hobby sheep farmer as well as an oncologist. And looking at the structure, he thought from precedence that maybe it could have anti-cancer activity. So testing it in the lab, he found that it had specific anti-cancer activity against cancer cells and really no activity against normal cells. So interrogating well-known cancer molecular pathways, PharmAust found that Monopantal acts to inhibit an mTOR pathway, which is one of the major pathways cancer used to escape growth constraints and just grow uncontrollably. So this was unexpected, and as Roger explained, an off-target position for monopantal, which allows us to repurpose it as an anti-cancer therapeutic. In this middle picture here, you can see by inhibiting mTOR, you inhibit a molecule called P70S6K. And what this does is stop protein from being produced inside the cell. So in cancer cells, it starves them of protein and they're put into stasis and eventually die. Inhibiting mTOR also inhibits or promotes, I should say, a process called autophagy. So autophagy is the production of these vesicle structures which mop up degraded proteins and organelles, and even when autophagy is growing very fast, even entire cells and cells like cancer cells. So it's a clearing mechanism for the body. And this is how we propose that it works to eliminate cancer cells. As an mTOR antagonist, there's a family of these, the lead molecule rapamycin and its associated molecules called the rapalogs. They're already registered in the market by the FDA, the TGA in Australia, and they're approved for the treatment of cancers such as breast cancer, renal cell carcinoma, some blood cancers, neuroendocrine tumours that might affect the pancreas, gastrointestinal tract, and also the lung. And so they have sales at the moment of $2.5 billion. And PharmAust believes a monopantal is a much safer drug, and we're looking to position alongside these rapalogs and take market share for the anti-cancer activity of these mTOR inhibitors. Another proposition which we have considered because of the ability to inhibit mTOR and induce autophagy is what effect this might have on motor neuron disease, which is currently a $3.6 billion market, and antivirals for COVID-19, the causative agent SARS-CoV-2 and how it may affect that. And at the moment, it's hard to get an idea of the market capitalization for any antiviral because the virus keeps increasing and the age groups to be treated are expanding. So last time we had a look, it was about $10 billion, and we would be looking to position monopantal there as well. As an overview of how this might work, with motor neuron disease, it's a proteinopathy where in the neural cells that control locomotion, for example, proteins build up, they're misfolded and they're not processed properly. And autophagy should be able to, or stimulation of autophagy, clear these misfolded proteins which are associated with the causal agents of the disease, and therefore restore health to the motor neurons. So that's our hypothesis. With COVID-19, the virus SARS-CoV-2 hijacks the autophagy machinery to hide inside the vesicles. And they kind of make them differently. So these vesicles can't degrade products, but the virus can happily live inside there, replicate and be expelled to undergo secondary infection of cells and other people. With monopantal, we hypothesize that by inducing autophagy normally, you're starving the virus of the components that it requires to hide within the cell, and also creating these vesicles properly so we can degrade the virus and slow down its propagation. So the next slide, please. So to assist in the clinical trials in both pet dogs and humans, we've been looking to secure manufacturing of both monopantal itself and the tablets. And at the moment, we're synthesizing monopantal with Sinjin for the human work. As we announced this morning, we've recently succeeded in producing 500-gram demonstration batch to show that the procedure works. This is being sent to Catalent in the US now, who will be making smaller tablets for the COVID-19 and fight MND trials, because we want to give lower doses just to give autophagy a bit of a nudge. We also have a Catalent demonstrated previously a fantastic stability for the tablets they make, the full size for anti-cancer. And one of the GMP runs has been greater than 24 months shelf life so far. The other 19 months, they're ongoing. and the impurity profiles are just really fantastic. They're within 15 times the limits that raise any concern with the regulators, and this is already at 24 months. And we've recently rebooked our scheduling for 36 and 48 months to see how far we can push out this window. For the tablet manufacturing so far, Catalent have done a fantastic job. They're GMP certified and audited for the state of California, but they're not really geared up for phase 3 trials, which requires an extra level of care and documentation for production. So we're asking companies such as Sinjin to do this, and we're in final stages of negotiations to get the tablet manufacturing program up and running, where, as Roger spoke of before, we will be getting scored tablets so we can include dogs less than 8 kilograms in the registration, otherwise that wouldn't be included. And we're also setting up 3 batches of stability. This is the minimum required for the FDA, TGA, EMA, for example, for acceptance of a registered product. So we're putting all of these processes in place at the moment. Next slide, please. So these are the 3 trial programs that we're speaking about for human work. We've had interest from the UK and Italy for phase 1-2 trials in gastrointestinal cancer, esophageal and pancreatic, and we're also looking to set up glioblastoma as a preferred target. For the fight motor neuron disease, we've been awarded $880,000 by Fight Motor Neuron Disease Charity to help with the phase 1 trial setup, which is really fantastic. And this is being established by the principal investigators, Dr. Susan Mathers in Melbourne and Professor Dominic Rowe in Sydney. So this will be a multi-state trial within Australia. And these are the preeminent motor neuron disease physicians within Australia. For the COVID-19 human trials, we're in discussions with several CROs, one in Europe, and they're looking to find clinical sites for us for when we have the tablets ready. And this is on the back of the preclinical data we generated with WeHi 360 Bio and Leiden University. The WeHi and 360 Bio labs demonstrated inhibition of virus replication and infectivity. Leiden University, they had a few problems we spoke about of solubility in their systems. They also had different assays where they looked at extremely high titers of virus for infection, extremely short turnover times. And by combining all of these data together, we came up with a hypothesis that monopantal is hitting a different stage of the virus life cycle than the current RNA polymerase inhibitors like remdesivir, you may have heard of, and also the protease inhibitors that are in late stage trials as well. So we think we'll be able to add monopantal in a cocktail. Well, this is what we'll be looking to do anyway. But first of all, we definitely want to demonstrate antiviral activity on its own for monopantal in people with COVID-19. So next slide, please. So moving forward, the strategy is to look at what we've done with these phase 2 outcomes, which are indicative of a commercial valuable proposition. We'd like to put these into a phase 3 trial so that we have the proper controls and the proper comparisons, just to demonstrate that the monopantal actually does show these levels of anti-cancer activity. This will be our registration trial, which we will be submitting for licensing or selling to the cancer majors as well. With this data in dogs, we're more confident now of getting the right dose for human cancer. And we know that translating from canine cancer to human cancer should be relatively straightforward. Canines have naturally occurring cancer. They have intact immune systems, the same as humans, and they're much closer to the human condition than lab mice, for example, are. And then on the back of this as well, with our demonstration of mTOR inhibition in humans and dogs now, that we'll be looking at other mTOR indications such as COVID-19 and motor neuron disease. So supporting this strategy is the success we've found so far with B-cell lymphoma, which is a very aggressive disease. We've also shown that at our optimum dose, Monopental is a very safe drug with absolutely minimal side effects and high quality of life, which Roger spoke about earlier. And so we'll be setting up this phase 3 in combination with Prednisolone. So the next slide is the final slide for this part, and this is the timelines. So you can see we're really targeting for an April start date for each of these activities. So this would be the motor neuron disease trial start, COVID-19 trial start, and also the phase 3 trial start. So the reason for this is that we're presently scaling up the GMP manufacture with Sinjin, and we have to wait for 1 month data at minimum, accelerated data to demonstrate the batch produced is safe for human use. For the canine trials, as I said, we're negotiating the final steps for producing tablets for a phase 3 study. This is going to take about 5 months. So here we're looking at the scored tablet, which is a new operation, a new facility, which is a new operation, and also the 1 month stability data, which adds a bit of time onto the program as well. So that's where we're up to at the moment. And thank you for joining us today. And I will now pass over to Colin at Epichem to update you on what Epichem has been up to.
Thank you, Richard, and hello everyone, and thank you for your time today. So for those new shareholders that may have joined us recently, just to give you a bit of background on Epichem. So Epichem started 18 years ago with 2 major objectives in mind. The first one was to provide services and products for an unmet need in medicinal chemistry. And the second objective was to provide employment opportunities for PhD graduates at the time. So if you cast your mind back 18 years ago, we were losing the knowledge economy to either overseas, or they were being baristas in a cafe, and probably more recently Uber drivers during the height of the recent pandemic. So Epichem is a wholly owned subsidiary of PharmAust, and we're also an Australian-based contract research organisation based in Perth, Western Australia. We're also considered in the top 10 SME employers of PhD graduates. And also a very proud national and state export award winner. The organisation employs a large number of PhD and postgraduate chemists across 3 major disciplines, namely medicinal chemistry, synthetic organic chemistry, and analytical chemistry expertise. And we've now developed and evolved and grown the business to 5 divisions, namely synthetic and medicinal chemistry. So this is where we provide drug discovery, drug development, and drug design expertise to our global client base. We also have a division called Pharmaceutical Reference Standards. So this is the division where we produce and manufacture reference standards for organisations whose products are moving from patent to off-patent or generics, or those that are moving from prescription to over-the-counter medication. Our third division, known as custom synthesis, and as the name would suggest, is where we get many requests from our international client base around bespoke molecule and compound manufacturing, which we do in this department. Our fourth division is called Analytical Chemistry. So this has a 2-pronged approach. It also provides an internal resource for our other divisions within Epichem, but it also has its own external revenue generating arm, and also has clients outside the life science and biotech sector, including mining and oil and gas clients alike. The 5th division is called Material Science. So this is where we provide method development consulting expertise to accelerate commercialization of our client IP and their assets moving forward. And one of the things that we're very proud of at Epichem is about how do we not only protect our client IP, but how do we help the clients to generate more IP with novel, innovative, disruptive technologies and discoveries as part of our chemistry expertise moving forward. Next slide, please. So on this slide, I just wanted to share with the audience just some of the work that we undertake around our worldwide client base, which includes pharmaceutical companies, biotechs, startups, mining, agriculture, and animal health sectors. We have 2 purpose-built state-of-the-art laboratories here in Technology Park in Western Australia. And as I mentioned, we employ a very large team of PhD qualified chemists in that portfolio. So when I look at medicinal and chemistry and drug discovery, some of the work that we undertake is around hit-to-lead projects, lead optimization towards candidate selection on behalf of clients. We also do synthesis of analog libraries and scale-up, to name a few, including things like the development of drug conjugates, fluorescent tags and metabolites. And we provide a very flexible, both fee-for-service and full-time equivalent proposal for our clients in terms of contract options. We also have a proven track record of success. So apart from having state-of-the-art technology and equipment, as listed there on the slide, we also are certified for ISO 9001, and we're also NATA accredited to 17025 and 17034. So these are the major standards required for both laboratory and the production of pharmaceutical reference standards on a global scale. I'm happy to share with you a recent update that Epichem was recently announced as the 2021 WA Export of the Year for International Health, an award that we have won on 4 occasions over the years, and more recently 2019 and 2017. And so that's something that we as an organisation are very proud to share with you today. We've also been recognised by some other global award standards, including the GHB Biotechnology Awards, which we won in both 2020 and 2021 respectively, which we were just notified of recently. I also wanted to share some partnership success. So we've had a 13-year consecutive relationship with an organisation in Geneva called DNDI, which stands for Drugs for Neglected Disease Initiative. This is a fantastic success story for our organisation. Last year alone, the Epichem chemistry team developed more than 500 molecules on behalf of this client. And yesterday I was reminded by DNDI about how many pre-trial clinical candidates Epichem has developed for them during that duration. This contract has been worth in excess of $50 million to Epichem over that period of time. And we're in the process now of negotiating a new contract for 2022 moving forward. Pyc Therapeutics is another organisation that is also listed on the Australian Stock Exchange and NASDAQ. We developed a drug for an ophthalmic disease called retinitis pigmentosa, which for patients that develop this disease, they have the risk of going blind. And we work together in partnership and collaboration with Pyc and their biological leadership team to develop a solution which one, stops people going blind, but also means that currently the treatment available is an injection directly into the eyeball 4 to 6 weeks. So a great outcome in terms of working together in that portfolio. And finally, Forever and More, an organisation that reached out during the height of the pandemic. They were looking to produce hand sanitizer, and we also supported them with the production of a surface spray. And I'm happy to share that we did all the viral side and bacterial side efficacy studies for the organisation, which allowed them to get FDA approval and CE marking. We're currently undertaking some TGA work for the organisation, but I'm happy to share that organisation is now exporting to 8 markets over the last 6 months. So we're very proud to share the important impact we've had there. Also, just a reminder of the work we undertake for our parent company, as in PharmAust, around the lead drug development and validation, the drug candidate pipeline manufacturing analysis, as well as the drug reformulation, GMP synthesis and stability support, along with inventory dispensing and to all of the clinical trial centres on behalf of PharmAust. The next slide, please. I'd now like to take an opportunity to introduce you to one of the major products we're undertaking as part of our material science offering, called Oxidative Hydrothermal Disillusion. A very big word where I'll use the acronym OHD moving forward in this presentation, which is described as a waste conversion and repurposing technology. So this is a technology which allows us to take biomass and feedstock, run it through a flow reactor, and look at developing a series of revenue-generating end-user products from the waste that we receive. This technology is very novel, it's innovative, and it's very disruptive. It uses liquid water. So if I can take your mind back to your days in chemistry, we know the kettle boils at 100 degrees and we get what's called a steam or a gas. This technology allows us to keep water in liquid phase for over 300 degrees Celsius. You combine that with molecular oxygen and you introduce high temperature, high pressure, and it allows us to achieve some of the things that I'll outline in subsequent slides. But I did want to share that the picture on the slide that you have access to of the benchtop flow reactor is, in actual fact, the benchtop flow reactor we have here at EpiChem that we have built, designed and developed for the purpose of R&D, and I'll share more of that in subsequent slides. Next slide, please. So why did we go down this pathway? So first of all, I often talk about you only have a product if you have a solution to a problem, otherwise you just have an idea. And I'm happy to share that with the research we undertook with the mining sector, the government incentives and policies as outlined in the slide you have in front of you, we realised that there was an opportunity to really take the chemistry expertise we have here at EpiChem, partner that with the mining and ag tech sectors, to name a few, and provide a solution to a well-documented worldwide problem. And that is, how do we convert and repurpose waste with some of these key markets and verticals? So the one thing that we have is the government support for a lot of these initiatives. So what we're seeing now is mining companies wanting to ensure their waste is converted and make it go away. We also have pressures from stakeholders and shareholders on organisations around their ESG, or environmental, social and governance impact, and what they're doing proactively in that space moving forward. And we also have the opportunity to potentially not only convert the waste, but support organisations to repurpose their waste into revenue-generating end-user products. And I think that's an exciting space that we can definitely play a very important role in comparison to what is currently on the market. Next slide, please. So just some of the benefits of OHD. So it's technically straightforward and operates in industrial feasible conditions and rates. As I mentioned earlier, it uses only water and oxygen. It requires no solvents or catalysts. So what that means is that there's no nasty emissions created from not having to use solvents or catalysts. It achieves high to complete conversion of the starting solids with high recovery. In some cases, 75 to greater than 90% of the products are solubilized to low molecular weight materials. It's environmentally friendly, produces little to no CO2, and it produces no nitric oxides or sulfur oxides as problematic emissions. So when you look at this technology compared to what's currently in the marketplace, most of the technology either converts a single-use product into a hydrogen or a single-use biogas. This technology allows the chemistry chem to tweak the technology to determine the outcome and determine the low molecular weight products we're looking for. So it's how I often describe as unbaking a cake. So it's like taking a slurry or waste mass, giving the client back their raw materials which have a revenue generating potential. So it can convert that liability to that asset. So the technology will allow the conversion and removal of waste. It will allow the conversion of waste into valuable end user products. As I mentioned, many clients are excited by the fact of potentially converting a liability to an asset. It reduces the need on the impact of waste storage in landfill. I think that's an exciting proposition on its own. There is a potential mineral extraction capability. So we are working with some partners at the moment to explore OHD in the mineral extraction space. There's 2 projects that we're undertaking, and I'll talk about that in a minute. I think OHD will have a positive impact on the circular economy in terms of repurposing, converting, and giving back products that can then be recycled once again. And I think there's a multi-sector application with this technology. including, as I mentioned, mining, oil and gas, and the agriculture and ag tech sector, to name a few. The next slide, please. So how does OHD generate money from waste? So in this slide, I just wanted to share, for example, we put a biomass or a feedstock organic waste slurry into the reactor. It goes through the heat exchange and centrifuge within that reactor with a process known as reverse osmosis. And some of the areas that we can produce already, so if I use an example like coal, we can convert coal into diesel, biofuels, liquid fertilizers, and biostimulants. And this graph is a nice roadmap to share with the audience in terms of what are the specific touch points where there are potentially revenue streams that can be generated from this technology. So in this example, biostimulants, it's used by farmers in terms of increasing not only their crop sizes, but crop yields. Fertilizers, so coal can be converted into fulvic acid or fulvate, which is a key ingredient of fertilizer manufacture. Biofuels need no introduction. And then we can also produce fine chemicals, which are used in a number of applications through a number of industries. And obviously then we can talk about chemical recovery as well. So thank you. Next slide, please. So some of the highlights around OHD is I'm happy to share that the benchtop flow reactor has been constructed and commissioned for operation, and we're using it at the moment as we speak. I can share with the audience today that we have proof of concepts for coal, both in terms of Collie black coal and Victorian brown coal, in terms of converting it into biostimulants, high-value fine chemical products and precursors, and obviously green biodegradable plastics, and obviously fine chemicals as well. We also have proof of concept for what we call lignocellulosic biomass, which is agricultural plant matter, converting that into other wastes, including sawdust, sugar canes, bioethanol, cellulosic ethanol, to name a few, as well as high-value fine chemical products, as well as precursors for green biodegradable plastics. We also were successful in being awarded a $200,000 waste sorted e-waste grant. That allowed us to undertake the building of the flow reactor as well as the research. And that allowed us to also work on behalf of the government to use OHD technology to test e-waste. So I'm happy to share that some of the e-waste outcomes are the conversion of e-waste into tin, lead, copper, gold, and platinum. But also what's very exciting is the preliminary work that we've done in finding and identifying the rare earth metals that are often used in Department of Defence, and also the reuse of electrics and electronics industries as well. Some of the work that we're undertaking as well is to do work in terms of single-use plastics and also rubber tyres. And we're also, as I mentioned earlier in one of my discussions, working with the West Australian School of Mines, based out of Curtin, with the utilising OHD in the role of mineral extraction under two projects. First project is to use the end user product in mineral extraction, and the second project is to actually run ores through the OHD flow reactor as a subsequent project as well. Next slide, please. I thought we'd use this opportunity to share with the audience a video about the OHD flow reactor that we have built and commissioned at Epichem. So I'll hand over to our organisers to share the video, please.
So here we've got our starting material, solid suspended in water, which we pull out into the slurry pump, which then gets fed into the reactor, so the slurry feed, which is preheated at the back. It then gets mixed with the oxidant feed, which is also preheated. And here's where the mixing occurs. And then the mixture goes into the reactor where it reacts for 10 seconds. It's literally just a matter of seconds. And afterwards gets cooled down to room temperature again, and then gets released into drag pressure regulator. The entire process requires no catalyst. And you start with a solid, and then you end up with a liquid. Everything is dissolved.
So what we were able to demonstrate, conversion of coal into fulvic acid. For those of you that are keen on the literature, fulvic acid can be applied to your crops, and there is a 25% increase in crop size and crop yield. So that end user product can be directly applied moving forward as a specific example. And finally, just to highlight some of Epichem's achievements in 2021, first of all was the contract extension with DNDi for a 13th consecutive year. That has been an exciting project that we have made a significant contribution to patients worldwide with some of our pre-trial clinical candidates that are also in phase 2 and phase 3 trials as we speak. The introduction of OHD and that technology as part of our material science, we see this as an extension of our chemistry expertise in working with our team here at Epichem to solve an unmet need or provide a solution to a problem in the mining and agriculture, oil and gas resources recycling sector. I think the waste sorted e-waste grant allowed us the first stepping stone, as in the first time Epichem has ever pursued or achieved the government funding for actually building a benchtop flow reactor and then applying the technology as we see fit. The most recent WA Export of the Year award for international health, which we add to our awards and boardroom, and something that the Epichem team and myself are very proud of sharing. And then finally, in one of our recent announcements, we shared with the market that our Export Finance Australia loan has been fully repaid, and we paid off all of our debt liability on time for our major laboratory expansion when we moved from Murdoch into our first laboratory in 2014, and then we grew very quickly, requiring a new additional laboratory in 2018. And that was a significant milestone for the organisation to allow us to now focus on growing the business organically and exponentially. And I look forward to sharing some great milestones and insights moving forward. So thank you once again.
Thank you,
Colin. Thank you, Colin. I think we'll open up to a Q&A session now. We've received a few, actually before we go to the Q&A, I can advise Computershare have tabled collated the results of the poll, and all resolutions have been passed. So happy to advise that. Thank you all for voting, and we appreciate your ongoing support. The final results will be uploaded onto the market announcements platform of ASX following this meeting. We have received some questions throughout the discussion, and I'm happy to put those to the various panelists. The first one I've got here is probably Richard. You're the best person to respond to this one. Can you provide an update on the HTLV testing being conducted at the WEHI?
So at the moment, we're expecting the data for that to come in December. So the team is getting on with the work there, and yeah, we'll be able to provide an update in December.
Thank you, Richard. There's a couple of questions. Have we approached any clinics regarding a COVID trial? Obviously, we've covered that in this morning's announcement and in the presentation, but Richard, do you want to give a little bit more colour on that, perhaps?
Yeah, sure. So the most important thing about setting up a clinical trial is, of course, to find clinics and physicians who are willing to do that. So Roger and I in the last month have been actively speaking with CROs in several places to go out and find us some clinicians. So we understand there's active dialogue at the moment, and we can update the market when we have some resolution from that.
Thank you, Richard. Just with regards to the delays we've experienced so far, I've had a couple of questions. Does the company foresee any delays to the commencement of human trials? Obviously noting the indicative timetable that has been presented today, I just want to know what is in place to ensure we're not subjected to the same sorts of delays going forward.
Okay, so I'll answer that one as well, Sam. So the one delay we've had was from a key raw material coming out of a factory in China when COVID severely hit and China closed down the factories, and then they performed environmental audits. And this was a 6-month process at the beginning of this year, and it was disappointing, but there's nothing really we could have done about it. Since then, all of the raw materials have been provided to Sinjin. They've made the demonstration batch. They're starting the GMP batch. There can be slight delays with good manufacturing practice because there's a massive amount of documentation for a phase 3 trial. So just to get that right is always difficult, but it will never be, well, I would never say never, but I don't foresee it being 6 months again. There can be a couple of days here, a couple of days there, but at the moment, we're looking to start the trials in April. Catalent in the US, they've booked in the manufacturing time slots for the tablets. They've made these tablets 1 to GLP, twice to GMP before, so we know they've got the capability and the machinery booking, so delays would foreseeably be minimal, but who knows? We've got everything in place that we can.
Thank you, Richard. I've got a question here regarding, and I know we've covered this in previous presentations and discussions with our shareholders, but just to recap, I suppose, the gentleman would like to know if other parties still holding patents for the compound is preventing us from anything, including PR and advertising. I'm not sure who wants to answer that one. Roger, perhaps?
Yeah, I can touch on that. I think we're not restricted as of today in any way from what we're doing. And certainly the historic patents that govern Monopanto have a limited life, and the life will, in most countries, expire within about 2 years from now. So we'll be ready to go the moment the parent patents expire. But that's one way of looking at it. The other way of looking at it is that, of course, one can open up a dialogue with the patent holder and say, look, you're not making money on this. We can make you some money on this. Please give us a license. And that is what happens in our industry. People like to make money, and quite rightly so. And we think we would have no problem in doing a license for, well, there's 2 outcomes. One, we do a license for a year or 2 to get us to where we want to get to. Or my expectation is that when they see the results, they will say that we want that product. And that then gives them access to our patents for another 10, 15, 20 years, depending on which one we're talking about. Hopefully that sort of gives a flavour.
Yeah, that's very clear, Roger. Thank you. I've got another one for Richard, and you did cover this in your presentation earlier, but I'll put it to you anyway. When does the company expect to receive the 10 kilos of MPL scale-up run being manufactured by Sinjin post the proof of concept 500 milligram manufacturing run? I think that was in the timetable, but there might have been a bit of confusion from some shareholders with regards to the 500 gram versus the 10 kilos, or you might be able to clarify that, please.
Yeah, so yeah, 500 grams, not 500 milligrams. So the 500 gram is what's called a demonstration batch. So whenever you're scaling to 10 kilograms, you don't try and make 10 kilograms in the first batch because you have to make sure your systems, structures, processes are accurate. So this has been done, and that's a discovery phase, an R&D phase. And so now Sinjin is confident they can scale to 10 kilograms. So PharmAust actually doesn't receive the monopanel. We'll be shipping it to Catalent for tablet manufacturing. And at the moment, we've booked in for early January for tablet manufacture. And then Catalent will be doing some exploratory work again because we're making smaller tablets than we made last time for cancer. So they'll make demonstration batches. And once they've demonstrated that hardness, friability, dissolution is the same as what's expected, which is required for GMP, then they'll scale to the thousands of tablets we need for the clinical trials. And in the slide I had, we're expecting this to occur start the clinical trials in April next year.
Thanks, Richard. Another one while I've got you there, and it's regarding the Olivia Newton-John Institute. Are they still continuing the MPL preclinical investigations into mechanism of action?
Yes, they are. But unfortunately, Victoria's been hit by lockdowns and they haven't been allowed to go to the labs. And this has been actually a bit of a problem for a lot of centres in Victoria and other states as well. So at the moment, things there are slow. They're looking at identifying the mechanism of action, the pathways used by monopanel. They have made progress. We've had data coming out showing what sort of pathways downstream of monopanel are being activated, whether they're autophagy, apoptotic, what molecules are involved, what some of the key hits might be, and then we will have validation ongoing. So it's unfortunately hard to put a timeline to that. I understand Victoria should be opening up again tomorrow, but we'll see what happens with the laboratories and how long these laboratory opens will stay open for, but they don't actually impact our clinical programs. For example, the dog trial, the COVID, the vitamin D, or our future cancer programs. But we would be very interesting to know what the mechanism of action is specifically, get more molecules and have more patents around technology. Thanks,
Richard. The gentleman who asked the question about the manufacture of the 10 kilos would like to just get some further clarification. Specifically, when do we expect Sinjin to complete the 10 kilo manufacture?
So at the moment, it's scheduled to be completed at the start of December.
Thank you. There's only one other question that I have here. I'll put it to Roger because I suspect it relates to him living in the UK. And the question is, does the board feel the dispersed nature of the executive management domiciles allows for the most efficient management and decision making? Roger, do you think that there's any issues with you living in the UK in the modern era with Zoom and people being worldwide?
I think from a business perspective, there's very little impact whether I'm sitting in my house or my home in Melbourne, or whether I'm sitting in my home in Oxford. I'm on the end of a Zoom call, so it doesn't make any difference. I think from a personal perspective, though, I would like to get home.
Indeed.
Yeah.
Looking forward to doing some travelling myself.
Yeah.
Look, there's no more questions. I'm happy to wait here unless anyone would like to ask another question. I'll give you a couple of seconds to tap away. Okay, there doesn't seem to be anything else coming through. No messages coming through on my phone or on email either. So I'll thank everyone for your attendance. As stated before, we will put the final results of the poll will be disclosed to the market on the ASX platform. A copy of this presentation has been recorded and will be available on the PharmAust website. We look forward to keeping you in the loop with any developments. Thank you all.
Thank you, everyone.